What's up, everybody? Good afternoon. So, last couple weeks, I've been on this channel talking about the salary cap a lot. I've been talking about the players the Seahawks can cut to free up cap space. I've talked about players we can restructure to free up cap space. Talked about the guys we can extend to create additional cap space. Talked about what the ramifications of these things are. Talked about the cap space that we already have. Gone through all these things. Looked under every rock. Looked under every stone. Looked under every log, every branch. Anywhere that can be searched, I have searched for cap space. And after doing all of it, I believe that I can reasonably and logically get this team to a place where they have about 75 million in cap space. If I really wanted to, I could probably get it to like 80, but let's call it 75. Okay, let's not go too crazy here. Let's say 75, and then you start re-signing players, and obviously that takes up some money. And then you start bringing in new players when free agency starts. That takes up more money. I've talked about backloading contracts so you can fit more contracts in. That's, I think, that's not even really a trick at this point, right? Everybody knows about backloading contracts, but got one last trick that I want to talk about. And I talked about this a little bit last year because the Seahawks actually started using this trick for the first time ever. But they have an opportunity this season to use it a whole hell of a lot more than they did. Actually use it in a way that is beneficial to the roster, that gives them more contracts to work with. So we're going to talk about voidable years. And a little bit confusing, although I think at this point a decent chunk of the NFL fan base has kind of figured out how this works, but I want to go over this. And I want to talk about how it can help us and how it's already helped a lot of other teams. And I'm going to say it again. Other teams are doing this. Across the board, you are seeing other teams doing this. So if you don't do this, you're trying to play catch up. You're working from a place of a disadvantage. So if you're not willing to do stuff like this, you're probably not going to have elite success. So according to Over the Cap, voidable contract years are basically fake contract seasons that are simply used for salary cap manipulation. The purpose of the void year is to allow a team to pay a player a signing bonus and prorate for more years than actually exists on the contract. Basically, it's buying on credit with the cap. Buy now, pay later. And the Seahawks did this last year a little bit, so I can go over what this all means with a pretty obvious example. But just because we did it a little bit last year doesn't mean we can't do it a lot this offseason to bring in more players. So we did the void year with a few players in 2021. Chief among them, Gerald Everett. So basically, here's the idea. Gerald Everett signed a 1-year, $6 million contract with the Seahawks. However, only $4 million of that cap hit in 2021. So you're getting a player for $6 million, but you're only giving him $4 million in 2021. How do you do that? By moving $2 million of that cap hit to 2022. Now, that's the downside. You're on the hook for $2 million to Gerald Everett in 2022, despite the fact that he is a free agent. Excuse me. So yeah, you have to pay him a little bit despite the fact that he may not be on your team. And even if you bring him back, that dead cap hit remains. It's effectively a dead cap hit. But it allowed you to get away with spending less the previous year when he was actually on your team. So this is a very basic example of how to use a void year. You get a player for $6 million, but he only counts against your cap for $4 million in exchange for him counting for $2 million the following year when he's not on your team. So that's a small example. That's just $2 million on the salary cap's over $200 million. We're talking about less than 1% of the cap. But teams in the NFL have used it for much bigger contracts. They've taken on much bigger void year hits, and they are doing it so they can build the best possible team that they can while the getting is good. All right? Ryan Tannehill, good example. A couple years ago, Tannehill signed 4 years, $120 million, a lot of money, And what did the Titans do to make the cap hit just a little bit more manageable for those 4 years? They used void years. So you can see the cap hit for Tannehill these respective seasons. First year, 22.5. This year, 11.1. Next year, 38.6. The next year, 36.6. And then in 2024, he becomes a free agent, but you're still on the hook for paying him 4.6 million in 2024 and 2025. So those are cap hits that you're guaranteed to have in 24 and 25. Now by then the cap might be like 250 million, so it's going to be a little more manageable than it looks. But nevertheless, this was done to take a little bit of money out of the cap hits for the 4 seasons he's actually there. So by doing this, they have more money to spend over this period of time and can fit in more contracts under the cap. Therefore, to them, it's worth it. Dak Prescott, another example of a player who gets paid with a contract that uses void years. This is a monster contract, 4 years, 160 million, and it has void years too. A void year, rather. So you can take a look at the cap hit for Dak these first 4 years, 17.2. Next year's going to be 34.5, basically. Next year, 45.5, 48.5. And that looks bad. It is. I mean, that's pretty extreme. But it would be a lot worse if it wasn't for this $14.5 million dead cap hit in 2025. Now, hey, having a giant $14.5 million cap hit in 2025 when Dak is not even going to be under contract with the Cowboys because he's a free agent in 2025, that sucks. That's too bad. But that's a problem for future Jerry Jones. Current Jerry Jones gets to have Dak in 2021 on a $17.2 million cap hit, which is something that you can live with. That's something that you can look at and go, okay, well, if he's a starting caliber quarterback, we're getting him at a nice rate. And he was, for the most part, in 2021. So that's an example of a monster contract using a void hit. How about the bad man himself, Aaron Rodgers? Now, his contract is obviously huge, 4 years, 134 million. And the Packers, over the last several years, have been fighting and fighting and fighting to keep his cap hit as low as possible so they can field the best team that they can. And they probably kick the can down the road as much as they can. This first year, 21 million, 30 million, 21.5 million, 27 million. So in 2022, it balloons up to almost 47 million. So you definitely have a problem here. And you also have a problem the next year when you have a void hit of 33 million for a player who is not going to be under contract in 2023. He'll probably be gone this offseason, but either way, he's not going to be under contract with you in 2023. So look at the size of that void hit. And that sucks. But keep in mind, if the Packers had not done this, then this cap hit would have been spread out over these 4 years. They would have had less ability to keep guys, pay guys like Aaron Jones, bring in guys like Jimmy Graham and I think Robert Tonyan and the Smith brothers and some of the offensive linemen they brought in. Them having that monster 2023 void year, which, hey, that's going to hurt. That's going to sting. It has enabled them to be one of the best teams in the league over the last 3 years. So this gives you an idea of how you can use void years to your advantage. Now, in fairness, none of these 3 teams have been to the Super Bowl, but these are just 3 monster contracts, so I can illustrate the fact that you can do this with a big contract too. You can do it for a lot of money. And the player is generally not going to mind. It doesn't really make a difference to the player. And believe me, the teams that do make Super Bowls, the teams that are making deep runs in the playoffs every year, the teams that are doing a lot of damage, the way the Seahawks haven't been, they're using void years too. They might not be doing it with their quarterback, but they're doing it somewhere in order to make the teams they put together possible. Except for the Bengals, and kudos to them, I guess. So one way you might see the Seahawks do this in 2022, just to give an example, would be with the DK Metcalf extension, which I do believe will be coming this offseason. And let's say the extension is 4 years for 84 million. So 21 million a year. I think it could be more, but let's say it's 4 years, 84 million. He didn't have the greatest year in 2021. So let's look at two scenarios, without a void year and with a void year. So without a void year, how do we structure that 4-year, $84 million deal? What's the cap hit going to be? Let's say that first year is 8 million. Nice and manageable, fair. Then it balloons up to 17 million. And now you're starting to hurt a little bit, but hey, he's worth it. He's really good. And then you're getting to 25 million. Okay, now we're getting a little bit uncomfortable here. But still, okay. And then year 4, you've got 34 million. Ooh, you better hope you can restructure or extend or cut him by then, because $34 million to a wide receiver, you're getting dicey. And then in the 5th year, DK becomes a free agent and you owe him nothing. So you're still getting to 84 million. If you include one void year at the end of that deal, what are you buying for yourself? $2 million off the cap hit in each of those first 4 years. Only a $6 million cap hit in year 1. You're saving $2 million that you can go out and spend on somebody else. Same for year 2, year 3, and year 4. Just saving yourself $2 million a year that can be used to go somewhere else. It still hurts. It's still not fun to give a receiver $23 million, but it's a little better than 25. And yes, when you get to year 5, you're going to be owing that receiver, who is still a free agent now, $8 million. But an $8 million cap hit for a player who is not there anymore is fine, as long as that player balled out for you, produced for you, and helped you win a lot in those first 4 years. And by the way, you can restructure this contract to throw more money into year 5 to make the first 4 years a little bit more palatable. So it opens up a lot of opportunities, and it allows you to fit more contracts in under the cap. That's all I have to go over here. So let me know what you guys think, but this is one example of a way a void year can help. And look, nothing's free, but it's about what you can live with. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks.